Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Griz Paths, your favorite alumni career pathway series. My name is Jay Beagle. I'm the Engagement and Outreach Coordinator for UMAA, and I will be your moderator for today's panel. In this special second edition for February, we are about to have a wonderful conversation with 4 panelists in the nonprofit sector. And for any of those of you in the audience, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at any point to ask questions throughout the next hour, and I'll make sure I get those asked to our panelists. So none of you are here to listen to me talk, so I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. And if you want to say your name, your current position, and why you wanted to get into nonprofits. Anyone, take it away.
I'm unmuted, so I'll jump in. My name is Carissa Trujillo, and I work for Homeward. Homeward is a statewide developer of affordable housing, and we also teach first-time homebuyer and financial education courses. And I got into the nonprofit sector because I knew that I wanted to be engaged in my community in a way that was different than, by working in a way to support the community rather than just kind of more surface level. So I'll hand it over to Emily.
Thanks, Carissa. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Olson. I'm the Vice President of the Rocky Mountain region at Trout Unlimited. We're a national conservation organization, and I have the pleasure of working alongside about 65 staff across a 7-state region from Montana south to Arizona. We have offices across the West, including in downtown Missoula, and it's really fulfilling work. I have worked in the nonprofit sector for about 15 years now, and it felt like a natural fit after being in a federal government role and more state-focused government role. So really fulfilling work, and I'm glad to be here today with all of you. Jamie, pass it to you next.
Emily. So I'm Jamie Kovnas. I work on the Global Corporate Partnerships team at Save the Children US. So we're a global nonprofit organization. We work in over 100 countries around the world, and we're focused on making sure every child has the right to survive, thrive, and be protected. I've actually been in nonprofit, this is so crazy to say, but for over 2 decades now. Originally, after I graduated, I actually started out as a technical recruiter, which was a journey from an English degree into that in and of itself, but was successful in that career, but really just kind of always felt like I wanted to do something more and make a difference. I know we'll kind of get into that, but that journey led me to finding nonprofit, which is where I felt at home and have built my career now for the past couple decades. And I've been with Save the Children now. This is my first global organization for a little over 3 years. And I can pass it to Hannah.
Thanks, Jamie. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Zaroff. I'm the Executive Director for the American Red Cross of Montana. And then I also teach in the undergrad public administration nonprofit certificate program. And I just love nonprofits, all things nonprofits. I feel like I started back in high school, and the grind has been there my entire life. So started with the Boys and Girls Club of America in a small community in Northern Nevada, and then ran a grassroots organization here in Missoula, and now have made the transfer to the American Red Cross about 1.5 years ago. So I'm grateful to be here and look forward to answering some of the questions.
Yeah, well, thanks to all 4 of you for being here. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to this conversation. So I have a couple questions that I'll start asking here. But again, if anyone in the audience, if you have anything you want to ask at all or any comments, please drop that in the Q&A or the chat, and I'll make sure that question gets asked for you. So to get the ball rolling, what role did your education at the University of Montana play in preparing you for a career in your specific field? And anyone could just take that away.
I can dive deep on that one. Being a now faculty at the University of Montana, I was super excited to be able to come back and offer what insights I have with the nonprofit field. I went through the nonprofit minor when that was a thing at the University of Montana back in, 2016-ish, and got my certified nonprofit professional certificate through the National Nonprofit Leadership Alliance. And I feel like I was able to really start diving into research and understanding the more administrative side of how nonprofits operate from that experience. You know, as many of my peers here are executive directors, the many hats that an executive director wears, whether that's HR or fundraising or supporting programs or working with the board, right? And so I think it allowed me to have more of a well-rounded experience in being able to understand the different facets of nonprofit administration.
I can go next. Yeah, it's inspiring to hear, Hannah, and I think about like so many programs at UM are really service oriented, and so I didn't take the nonprofit minor. I was an undergrad in political science and environmental studies, and then stuck around to do my master's in the College of Forestry and Conservation, and was in the Davidson Honors College, and all of those programs required some type of practical hands-on experience or community service, or had different incentives for pairing real world experience with your coursework. And so I feel like I just had too many experiences to name with local nonprofits in the Missoula community, or just kind of letting me see what was possible in the nonprofit world while I was at U of M. And I'm really grateful for that and for the opportunities to get out in the real world through some of the more community and service oriented programs in environmental studies, political science, and then the College of Forestry.
My path was similar to Emily's. I didn't study nonprofit when I was in my undergrad. I did get a master's in public administration while I was working at the university, but I was a UM advocate, and a big part of the work that the advocates do is service in the community. And so connecting with nonprofits through that work and kind of in that mentality of service really, I think, helped. That was the part of my education, the out of classroom part of my education was really what helped lead me into the nonprofit world.
I think I get to take a completely different approach. And I will say, so when I went to the University of Montana, so I got my degree in English literature, and I think I was one of the students, I wasn't entirely sure even then what I was going to do with that degree, but landed in kind of account management and sales. I would say my time in Missoula, and it's interesting, I'm about to launch my daughter into college, so I've been thinking a lot about my days as an undergrad, but being in Missoula, I mean, I think the spirit of adventure and grit and meeting new people from all over is kind of what helped launch me into my career. And I will also say, so early on in my nonprofit days, so I was also an executive director and VP in various health organizations and covered the Northwest, Montana, Idaho, Alaska, Oregon. And I will say, being able to say many times going into Anchorage, and they would say, oh, but you're based in Seattle. And I would say, yes, but I went to college. I have a degree from the University of Montana. That opened door. So it mattered to be able to mention Montana in a lot of my relationships. Yeah.
So while we're on this early career trajectory, can you talk about first job or internship, and were there any unexpected turns there?
I'm happy to dive in. Yeah, so when I graduated with my undergraduate degree, I had a degree in sociology and in psychology, and then my nonprofit certificate. And this is kind of like an interesting part of my story. So during that time, it was really difficult to find employment. And I bet you I had, over 100 job applications that I had put forth trying to get a job in the sector. And I was unsuccessful in doing that because I didn't have the experience that so many folks wanted, which was really challenging. And I think as a faculty member now, I'm really trying to get my students to allow to really put those service learning experiences on their resumes and really beef up that part of their resume, because that was a huge barrier for me. Honestly, I started out right after graduating at Berkshire Hathaway doing marketing. I didn't study marketing, knew nothing about marketing, but it was the one job that was able to give me a shot. And I think through that experience and just knowing, being at a very low, right, of no one wants me to work for them. This was really hard on my self-worth at that time. But still fighting the fight and asking for feedback. You know, if I had an interview and I didn't get the job, asking, you know, what can I do better next time? And then I really started meeting with other professionals in the community just to get some mentorship happening. So it was a little rocky there at the beginning, to be honest, but I'm grateful for how it all shook out.
I started my career after undergrad as a recruiter for the University of Montana, which is a really easy step when you're a tour guide and an advocate. Just scooch on in over there. And it was awesome, and it allowed me to get a couple of master's degrees while I traveled. And so my first job really didn't have much to do with working in the nonprofit sector. And I think that the way that it helped me get to where I am now is there was space there to learn a lot of different skill sets. And that, I think, taking advantage of that and not just kind of sitting and doing just the job in front of me, but really trying to see is that, you know, can I learn a little bit in marketing because we have internal marketing happening? Can I support that effort? Can I learn a little bit more about the event side of things? Is there an event I can take on? So I learned that skill set, and trying to use that first job or internship out of college to really diversify your skill sets. Because I mean, I think similar to Jamie, I have a degree in elementary education, and I learned very quickly that that was not a good space for me. And that is not a degree that translates to much other than teaching. And so I think really trying to, in that position, like learn different skill sets rather than just focusing. I mean, obviously do your job. Don't not do your job when you're there, but are there ways that you can kind of branch out? And that really helped me. I think then when I was transitioning to the nonprofit sector, I had a more diverse range of skill sets than just the narrow job that I was hired for.
I can go next. I'm kind of laughing thinking back because my very first job at U of M was working for Griz Athletics to support the football games, which was a lot of fun, but has nothing to do with what I'm doing now. But I took on a number of jobs while I was in undergrad, and one of those, I think partway through my undergrad, was a student role with the U.S. Forest Service at the fire lab. And that ended up, I think I ended up staying with the U.S. Forest Service for 4 or 5 years after that. So it started out as a student role and transitioned from there into eventually a full-time role. So that was really good experience, and helped me develop a lot of relationships that I still have today, and I'm really grateful for that. But I took different paths, so that feels like the clear-cut thing to say because I did that and then went to work for the National Forest Foundation, a national nonprofit, and have kind of been in the field ever since. But on the side, I was trying different things. So for example, Jay, when you asked about other paths or things that maybe were unexpected, because I was a political science major, I did a summer internship with a U.S. Representative's field office, and honestly didn't like the work at all. I found myself in this field office and was like, nope, this is not what I want to do. My expectations were totally wrong. And so kind of finished the major, but it was nice to learn early on through that summer experience that wasn't the right path for me. So depending on how I tell the story, it can seem really linear, but as others have said, there are always some kind of twists or turns or things that might feel like a dead end, but ultimately it helped me get to where I am right now.
And I'll just say, yeah, again, having that path where I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I remember people when I was graduating saying, what are you going to do with an English degree? Are you going to be a teacher? And I said, no, I'm going to get a good job. And I think having that kind of sense of adventure and bravery, I remember also like Hannah applying for multiple things upon graduation. I also worked a lot of jobs when I was in Missoula, maybe less the internships, but I had jobs. I worked, I was an office manager, and I do remember my fundraising tidbit. I worked at the Excellence Fund, and that was my first foray into fundraising, was calling people and raising donations. And I was a crazy person that actually loved that job. So that's probably a sign why I ended up where I am today. But I think I remember going in and actually, I think just kind of that sense of wanting to try things, that sense of curiosity, that sense of like, you know, you're early in your stage. I was ready to work hard and do a lot. My first job, I ended up actually went in to apply for, it was like an office management type of role. And in the interview, they actually said, I think you would make a good recruiter. Would you like to pivot? And I said, sure. And so I ended up hiring engineers and software developers right out of school by just being willing to kind of dive in and try and learn something new. So it's an exciting stage of life. And then my pivot to nonprofit, I will say too, I think about that because it was almost like a restart when I made that choice. And it was really using the network that I developed and just reaching out to as many people as possible that had connections into the sector, asking for 5-10 minutes of their time to learn a bit more about their roles. And having that, I won't say one of those landed the job that I got into, but being able to tell people that I'd done that and what I learned from those conversations was really valuable in helping pivot me into the nonprofit sector.
Well, it's so great to hear all of your insights there because you all had such different paths to getting to where you are right now. So I hope everyone in the audience can take that away, that there is just so many different paths you can get to go work in the nonprofit sector. So can you talk about a mentor or a networking opportunity? I mean, Jamie, you were just talking about networking there, but a mentor or a networking opportunity that made a significant difference in your career.
I'll just start since I was last speaking, but I was trying to think about a specific mentor, and I think there've been, so many in my career. I can think of certain people and their names, and really they're people that I still go to now. I think keeping your networks warm and active and looking for ways to support them, but just not being afraid to ask for that advice has been really valuable rather than, one person, but being open to mentorship and looking for those sorts of things. And then, the networking, I think it's really just not being afraid to reach out to someone that has University of Montana on their LinkedIn bio. I know I would be open if someone wanted to chat with me for 5-10 minutes and said, I'd just like to know a little more about development or nonprofit or global work, and asking for those sorts of conversations. I think that's really valuable. And so again, that's kind of what I had done to get into this sector.
I think that's fantastic advice. I mean, anyone who's walked through an airport in Griz gear knows that this is a tight community. And it's easy to find folks who are willing to talk if you have a goal or questions about a career path. I think that it's really easy to find alumni who are willing to talk about it. I'm kind of the same. I didn't really have any really strong mentors in my younger career. I was lucky to my first supervisor when I moved into the nonprofit sector is now our mayor, and any political beliefs aside, she's an incredible human to work for and was an excellent guide for me to then grow into this position. And so she's probably the one I would list as my professional mayor or my professional mentor. But I think that the networking opportunity conversation is an important one, and especially if there's a space that you are interested in. All nonprofits have various events. So if there's a specific sector of the nonprofit world you're interested in attending those events, checking in about volunteering. And I'll tell this story. So 4 years ago, I had a University of Montana student reach out to me because she had been referred by a former board member. She was getting a degree in something about sustainable communities. And I apologize, I can't remember the specific program, but we do a lot of sustainable construction business practices. And so she reached out and she said, I really want to do an internship with you. And I was like, well, we don't have an internship right now. I'm really sorry, but I'll reach out if we do. And she's like, well, maybe we should just meet and we can just kind of talk about things. Like, I get that you don't have an internship. And so I met with her and she blew me away. I created an internship for her and we brought her back as a temp employee for a little while. And now she works for us. So, and she's incredible. And we have, upward mobility planned for her. And so I think that kind of networking, it really can make a difference. And even if you end up not being a fit for one organization, they may be able to refer you to another one, like, oh gosh, your skill set and your interest would be an excellent fit for Front Step CLT or the Poverello Center or something, and they can make those connections because it's a pretty tight-knit group of folks that work in the nonprofit sector.
I'll go next. I might make a few specific shout outs. I was thinking back when I was an undergraduate, Lori Pingelli Drake was the external scholarships advisor at the Davidson Honors College, and I'm sure there's a similar role these days. but she was so influential because she really pushed me to be able to explain in writing my path and my trajectory and my future goals and to tell my story in a compelling way. And no one had ever done that for me. It was just like day to day, get through all the things. And so that was really influential. And then I took a class from Martin I when I was an undergrad and ended up being his graduate research assistant as a graduate student. And I continued to the point about keeping your network warm. He's someone who's still a go-to for me when different things come up day to day and I want to get his expert opinion. So I wish in hindsight I had stayed in contact with more people who were helpful and influential. And that would be, one thing I'd offer is to all the good points made so far, don't be afraid to keep those connections strong. I think you never know. It's a small world out there.
Yeah, I don't want to sound redundant, but everything that they said. And then I think the other piece is so often with networking, it's almost like this quid pro quo, right? Of like, what can I get out of you when we're like meeting quickly in a business networking event? And I think one thing that's more on the strength-based side is if you can really approach every single interaction that you have with the lens of building a relationship and coming at it with that true sense of authenticity of like wanting to get to know each other as humans. I think that has been invaluable for me. I definitely have, some faculty, Dr. Sarah Rimpre, who used to chair the MPA program at the University of Montana. She was huge in just opening my eyes to how legislation works with nonprofits and how we can have a seat at the table and have conversations around things that might be impacting our communities. And then, of course, there's been, multiple other individuals that I've met through networking events, which, to be fair, are really awkward when you start going to them and you don't know anyone there. Like, I'm just going to call that out. But once you start going, you start to build that sense of community. And if you're doing it correctly and coming at it with that authentic approach, those individuals are then now opening up their networks to you. And that's where the magic can really happen. And so there's nothing more fulfilling to me than when someone I met at a networking event then makes a connection to someone in their circle, because I think that goes to show the value of the relationship that's been created there. One of my closest friends, I tease him all the time that he's like my uncle now, but like I met him at a business after hours in Missoula. So I think the opportunities are endless. And if you're a student right now, reaching out to your faculty, meeting them for coffee, because they love that. Ask them about their research. They really, really love that. And just getting out there, like Jamie was mentioning, if you see someone on LinkedIn with a similar University of Montana line, like feel free to meet them for a virtual coffee, or if you're in the same space in person for coffee.
I was just to tag on, Hannah, I was just thinking like so much here has been good and it's fun to like think back. And I think, Carissa, you were saying like at these networking events, like being authentic, I always try and look for a way I can help the other person and just kind of take the pressure off that I need something from them. And I know I've been around for a while, so I can do that. But I really think of too, like the connections I've made, very rarely is it like the need is filled in that moment, but it's those connections that a year later or something happens that it comes around and you're so glad you made that connection, or at least that's been my path too.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the other piece I would add is like the follow-up, the magic of follow-up, right? Like this is kind of probably silly, but a little bit ago, I was like, oh, I should probably reach out. I know Carissa, luckily, because she's here in Missoula, but I'm like, I should reach out to Emily and Jamie and like get to know them more, right? Because I'm just now meeting them for the first time. But the power of a follow-up conversation to really be able to go deeper and build that relationship too.
Well, I'm going to kind of switch it up here real fast on you. And once again, if anybody in the audience has any questions, please drop those in the Q&A. But my question is, how has the rise of AI and machine learning impacted your respective role, and how does your organization utilize these tools?
Oh, I feel so strongly about this. So Homeward, at like our core of our mission, is about sustainability and sustainable practices and trying to build buildings that last a long time, that are eco-friendly and environmentally friendly for the residents that live in them and such. And it's really hard for me to wrap my head around AI specifically because of the water consumption challenges. That said, I think that AI has been able to streamline a lot of the work that we do. And I think that you can walk a really fine line utilizing AI, when you're writing a speech or you're writing a cover letter and asking AI to polish something that you have written, but really trying hard to make sure that you are being authentic in your work and making sure that the ideas are coming from you and you're like, hey AI, can you tighten this up a little? It feels wordy or something like that, like utilizing it to help you refine your thoughts rather than creating your thoughts for you. And I one of my board members and dear friends is on this panel because she's also a alumni board member. And she's an attorney, and there are attorneys who are using AI to write briefs or whatever the legal term is, and AI is putting in cases that aren't even real, and people are submitting these as if they're not double checking, they're not. So I think it's a real slippery slope, and there's a risk of losing your individual thoughts in the process. And I know that it's a lot easier just to have AI write you an entire speech or write you an entire legal brief and whatnot, but it's really important. And I think when you think about like entering a workforce, and I know there's a question later on of things that we're all looking for, being able to form your own thought is a critical piece to being successful as a professional. And if you are constantly using AI in your written formatting, it is going to be a lot harder for you in a conversation or a meeting to have really authentic, thoughtful conversations. Okay, sorry. I was ready for this one.
I love that. And I agree with you on so many pieces of that. I like to use the analogy of AI as like a peanut butter sandwich. So you think of AI or whatever platform you're using as like the peanut butter and jelly, but then the human element, as like the bread on each side, right? And so you need to start with your human element, and then you can use that to refine, edit, change. But then you also need to end with the human element, whether that's proofreading or adding your touch to it. If you're not doing that, then it is taking that authentic lens out of it. And I use AI every day. I'm a proponent of it. I do have very much so some similar concerns on the water consumption, and I'm trying to navigate with the dissonance that comes up for me with that. But even with teaching, right? Like, how do we teach students to be able to use this ethically and to talk about their use of AI, to where we can be, more knowledgeable of how it's showing up in our day-to-day lives. I do think I've heard of a lot of nonprofit professionals using it for grant proposals. But again, if you're not adding that realistic element to it, it's really going to detract from the work.
I love the peanut butter and jelly analogy. That's awesome, Hannah. So it's a hard one for me too, because Trout Unlimited works on water conservation and watershed health nationwide, and we're focused on native and wild trout habitat, but do a lot of water policy work across, especially the Western US. And so I have staff right now, and there are folks at TU who are smarter than me on this topic, thinking through how we can maintain a really pragmatic position on AI and data centers, because they will happen. They're being built all across the country right now. It's really more a question for us of how do we make sure they're in places that make sense, built in places that make sense, and try to, again, just take a really pragmatic position on it. On a position from inside of Trout Unlimited, we definitely are using AI for a lot of different things, and trying to figure out just what uses are smart and make sense. So to the other examples shared, I used it yesterday to organize notes. We've used it for recruiting and HR and like filtering through applications, and a lot of things that don't involve the important personal touch with writing that so many others have mentioned, but more so how to use it as an organizational aid or use it for internal documents that aren't going to go out into the world. So we're still figuring it out. We have a lot of staff thinking through the best and smartest way to use AI, and it's certainly a tool that I think we all kind of need to figure out what makes sense for us in our different organizations.
I mean, ditto. I think I'll just add to everything that folks have said. I mean, AI, and I said when I'm like, I'm glad this question is here. It's a hot topic. It's needed. I too use it quite a bit to refine writing. I have used it on a grant application, for example, not to write it, but to say like, I need to eliminate 20 words. I mean, things like that that used to take you quite a bit. AI can speed it up. My role right now, so I'm really focused on new business development on the corporate side for Save the Children. So on the research side, man, has it speeded things up there, but the hallucinations are real. They're not always accurate. So you certainly need to take that lens. Previously, when I first started with Save the Children, my role was really focused on partnerships specifically with the tech sector. And so, boy, was it a hot topic. So I will say there are some things outside of like how we use it day to day, you know, refining writing, that sort of thing that were being talked about. A particular application, we were working with humanitarian data. There's just dumps of humanitarian data out there in the world right now that, you know, someone that's responding quickly to an emergency in Gaza or wherever, you know, they don't always have time to sort through that data. So folks are, you know, we were supporting the build of an application using AI to help them more quickly access that data. There's work in our global health fields to allow folks that are in really remote settings be able to more quickly access, you know, medical information. So a woman in a, you know, village somewhere can really quickly be able to diagnose something. Or so there are really interesting, important practical applications that I get to see that people are talking about with AI. But the climate piece, the water piece, it's not a toy. That's kind of, you know, my pet peeve with AI. Like, make sure you're using it with a real purpose, because that piece is really real. And so we're also wrestling with that at Save the Children as well as the privacy and the data security piece of it. So we work with children, and so we need to make sure that what we're putting out there is secure and we're careful. So it's a really big topic, and I hope recent grads are talking about it. I'm glad to hear it's coming up quite a bit in classes, because it is something that I'm looking for when I'm hiring folks at kind of the entry-level roles. I want to hear that they're thinking about it and proficient with it and better than me. So.
Yeah, AI is definitely a tricky topic right now. So I loved hearing all of your perspectives, since all of your work is vastly different in your organizations. So what are some other key skills that you see are in high demand today? It may differ since you're all in different organizations, but how can students or early career professionals develop those skills? And are there soft skills that are important for success in your respective work?
I'll jump in. You know, some people have already mentioned kind of the fundraising skills, but I just think about business savvy, business skills, financial management. In the whole conservation environmental sector, none of us went to school for, you know, budget management and accounting, but that's what we're doing day to day in a major way. And so anything you can do in, you know, part-time jobs or internships or through coursework or even scholarship applications to develop those sorts of skills are really useful. And then again, just on soft skills, I'd say writing, well, I mean, writing's not really a soft skill, but being an effective storyteller and an effective communicator is really important, and something that comes up again and again.
I can jump in. So thinking about, I mean, I put AI when I looked at this question, but I think ability to wear multiple hats. And I will double click into Emily's, like the business side. I think that's one thing when I've done informational interviews or talked to people that are exploring the sector, that interestingly not everyone realizes is that we have goals and we have quotas and we have accounting, and like all the things that would happen in the corporation are there in nonprofit. You just have less resources. You really, really care about what you're doing, and you need to move really quickly. So those sorts of skills are really important. And then I'll just add, what I'm seeing right now is resilience to change and ability to move and pivot quickly. It's been it's been an interesting couple years, and things are changing, but the work still needs to happen. So being able to make quick pivots, be okay, and be resilient, maybe not okay, but be resilient to the fast pace of change in the sector and the world right now. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
I think a lot of it is actually more soft skills than the hard skills. I mean, the hard skills make sense, right? If you're applying for a position in the finance department, you obviously need to have some experience in finance. If you're applying for a position as a staff attorney at Montana Legal Services, you need to have legal experience. Like those are pretty clear cut, but I think that the resilience piece is a big one. Right now, a lot of nonprofit funding is in flux, in question, changing definitions, and you have to be really resilient. And I think creative and ready, and it kind of connects to the AI conversation. You have to be ready to have conversations and not just expect like a spoon feeding, if that makes sense. Like I think you really need to, and maybe this is a bit too much, but I think you really have to want it. This is not like nonprofit work, generally speaking, is not for the light at heart. It's not as straightforward, I think, as the corporate world might be. And I think that you really have to want to be in that world and be ready to have tough conversations. Communication is huge because if you're, especially if you're working in like a smaller team or a statewide team, a nationwide team, like you're dealing with different personalities, you're dealing with different, oh, this office in Billings does it one way and the Missoula office does it another way. There's interpersonal dynamics that happen within a team, especially when you're spread out. I get the ability to be a good communicator and receive feedback and give feedback and all those pieces. I think that communication is a really critical piece. We hired a gal. I thought she should come to our finance team because she had a background working in finance at the university. And my project development director, who manages all of the actual physical building developments, was like, I've been short a team member. Why aren't you referring her to me? I'm like, well, because she has a background in finance. And she's like, I can teach the hard skill part of our work, but I need somebody who has the ability to be flexible, ask the questions, what is interested in learning, right? And so a lot of times it's a lot more about a soft skill fit than a hard skill fit, outside of very specific examples like, if you need a law degree to do it. But soft skills are really important in the work that we do.
Yeah, I would piggyback off on that and say yes to the communication pieces. At the American Red Cross, one of our fundamental principles is being really neutral, right? Like we are a very neutral organization. So regardless of someone's political affiliation, religion, you name it, we are to remain neutral. And I think one thing that is important for me is to be able to have colleagues who can work with anybody, right? And that can be really challenging at times when someone's really irritating you or has a completely different perspective on something than you. But showing up with that empathy and respect, I think is a skill. And I think it's also something that seems like it's missing a lot in our day-to-day world anymore. So being able to work across lines and have, fruitful conversations that are respectful. I also think one other thing that comes to mind for me is, again, being willing to have the hard conversations. When I first started in my previous role as an executive director, anything HR related made me want to vomit and be so uncomfortable. And it's because I'm a deep core people pleaser. And I realized very quickly that, clear is kind. If those of you that maybe like Brene Brown, I think that's one thing that I've had to really get comfortable with being uncomfortable for the benefit of other people. And there's a line for that, but I think being able to adapt and get those communication skills in a way that's meaningful but still cares about the other person is something that's really important to me.
All right, so we do have a question in the chat that I want to address, and it is, how do you avoid burnout and maintain a healthy passion for the mission over the long term?
Understanding that the work is never done, and so you need to make sure that you have good work-life balance, I think is a really critical lesson. And that looks different to different people. I think it looks different generationally, which is really entertaining as an executive director to try to manage different generational expectations when it comes to work-life balance. And then for me personally, I don't think you should work in the nonprofit world unless you really care about the work. Like the work, I would guess, based on the conversation we're having, I would guess all four of us up here are so stoked about our mission and believe what we're doing is so important. And we have, we hire teams who are equally as excited. And if if you take that passion and you push yourself and your team to the point of burnout, then you're not doing anyone any good, right? And so trying to help maintain that balance. I think it's, if I were a new graduate going into the nonprofit sector, I would check in and watch the executive director when you're in your probationary period and see what kind of level setting and managing of their time they're doing, because I've worked in positions outside of the nonprofit sector where I actually had a supervisor tell me that vacation time and work time should just kind of blend together. And I committed to never being that kind of an executive director. And so I think that's, the probationary period is for you too, to also vet the organization and making sure that you have a leader that's not pushing the envelope when it comes to work-life balance is really smart.
Carissa, you so hit on what I think knowing nonprofit, the work is never done. I say in interviews sometimes, my favorite thing about this work is like, I've never crossed a to-do list off, and there's always something more and more interesting, and you care about the mission, so you want to keep going, but it's also the worst thing. So I think you have to kind of recognize that and know you need to take care of yourself. Personally, I will say having a child really opened my eyes, I think, to like before that and the amount of hours I put in. And then after that created some boundaries, but I realized I was a better employee. I was better at prioritizing, and I was more efficient when I had to kind of be smarter with my time. So I wish I had known that sooner. And this is, I think, having hobbies and having passions that you can lean into outside of work matter. My time in Missoula is where I discovered my love of the outdoors and skiing and hiking and being out in the mountains. And that I have to lean into that time to time with the work. So it seems simple, but nurture your hobbies. My husband works at Amazon, which is notoriously, they work a lot of hours and has a lot of stress. But that's the advice he always gives to his new employees, as well as like, find a hobby, something you care about outside of work, and don't let go of it. So I think that helps.
Yeah, I can jump in here too. I in my previous role was very all in. Like if I was awake, I was living and breathing my organization. And I think being able to transition into a new role has allowed me to set those boundaries more explicitly. And I have realized I'm a better leader because of it. If your team is seeing you working nonstop, they're also feeling like they need to be working nonstop. So setting those boundaries and being clear about that. And then in terms of the passion for the mission, I think sometimes in more administrative roles, or like fundraising, executive leadership, et cetera, sometimes we forget about the day-to-day and the boots on the ground. And it's so critical to be able to go join your team members, join your volunteers. At Red Cross, we have hundreds of volunteers that really are the reason that our mission exists. And so how can I join them in their endeavors and be that boots on the ground, one, as a support to them, but also for me experiencing the mission firsthand. So making sure that I have those kind of built into my schedule is really important to me. And then figuring out what my core value non-negotiables are. And that's been some work that I've really been focusing on in the last year and a half, of what things are my rituals on the day-to-day that they're non-negotiable. I'm going to be doing that. So movement is one for me that I know that I'm going to go crazy if I'm not incorporating that into my day somehow. So those are just some little tips. I'm happy to talk more about that because I went from complete burnout to like not complete burnout. And so we can talk more offline too, if that's of interest.
I love these responses because it seems like we've all kind of hit that wall at some point and had to deal with it. So it's really inspiring just to hear this. And I just second the comments about all of us in our roles being the ones who have to carry the culture. So it's not just taking care of ourselves, but also making sure that we're setting an example that we want for the rest of the team. And the only one I'd add more to is Jamie's comment on balancing motherhood with a leadership role in a nonprofit organization. I feel like when I had my first kid, I was in an earlier point in my career and felt like I needed to just prove myself and keep showing up and like go, go, go. And I've matured, have a second daughter, and now I'm used to those uncomfortable positions where you might be the highest ranked person with the youngest kids and you have to deal with a lot of the logistics and just kind of manage some of that in a way that's sometimes vulnerable, but also now I know provides a strong example for a lot of people who may be watching you and your organization to see how you respond and how you show up and how you make it all work. And so I found some good camaraderie and had really good conversations with colleagues and other people at my nonprofits over the last however many years, just about how to manage being a working mom and a nonprofit leader. And it's been fulfilling for me too, and hopefully helpful to them.
Well, thank you for that question, B. That was very great. And if anyone else has any questions through the next couple minutes, feel free to drop those in as well. We can move on now, and I have a unscripted question real fast, but what is your favorite part of your work? Anybody wants to go with that?
I'll start. It's the people I get to work with every day. Just it's so sorry if I took that one from all of us, but just I get to work with incredible people who are also fired up and inspired to do this same work, and it's what keeps me going all the time.
100% same. I have such an incredible team, and it really is. And they care about the work, and the work is important, but it's the team atmosphere. And like, I think genuinely people really enjoy coming to work and doing it. And the work we do is important. I think at Homeward, we're really lucky because part of the job that we do is just to build physical buildings. And so it's like when you're done mowing the lawn, how good you feel. You're like, look at what I did. It makes it, you can see this beautiful historic rehabilitation, and that people who live below the area median income are going to get to live there and pay rents that they can afford. And it just is like a physical image of the work that they're doing. And I think that the team really relishes in that as well. But it's all about the team, 100%.
I mean, I'll just kind of double click into colleagues at Save the Children. I get to work. I mean, sometimes I'm like, I am so lucky I get to be in the room with this brilliant person that has like dedicated their lives to these incredibly complex crises and different things. And it's also like the relationships back to that. I mean, again, I've worked in all kinds of roles, but really development, I think in nonprofit, you're kind of always, no matter what you're doing, a little bit doing development, but the relationships and kind of fundraising is hard when you're asking for money, you're asking for their time. But it's people when they're having those conversations, I find them often, those are good moments to be talking to someone and they want to be making a difference. So finding the joy in those relationships and those conversations. And then for me too, this is, again, it's the pro and the con, but I love that we get to wear different hats in this organization because we have to be nimble and we have to be tight with resources. Sometimes you're developing relationships, making asks, but I'm also developing a new concept for our entire organization to has marketing elements and different things that I think in a bigger or maybe a for-profit, there would be a lot of different hands. And because we have to be nimble, you get to try different things and do different things, and that's encouraged. So yeah, I think there's a lot to love about this work in the sector.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a day that I can think of at least where I looked at the clock to see when I would get to go home. So every day is ever changing and it's not redundant. You're not doing the same thing every day when you're working at a nonprofit because of the many hats that you're wearing. I also think on the relationship side, I love being able to build those relationships with community partners and figure out, it's almost like a puzzle, like who can I help connect to one another to further enhance mission to better support the whole community, right? So taking a step out of just specifically, the work of the American Red Cross, but also just connections in general. And then on the fundraising side, and for Red Cross, our volunteers too, who are equally as important for us, figuring out what their linkage is to the mission and being able to listen to the storytelling is really empowering to me. So I really love getting to hear what makes people motivated to be a part of the mission.
So we have time for probably 2-ish more questions. So I'm going to go ahead and ask, what are some ways you continue learning or staying current in your career fields?
I think professional development is really critical in our work. And that is another thing, if you're interviewing, asking about what kind of professional development opportunities are available is an important interview question for you to ask. Knowing that an organization is going to invest in your growth is I think something that you should use when you're vetting. And then we've talked a lot about networking, but also finding peers in your world, even if it's not the same kind of nonprofit, but trying to find folks who do similar work as you. So you have someone that can vent, but you also have someone that you can share resources and ideas with. That kind of networking is really important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was thinking professional development right away. And I would spend half my time doing professional development because I love that stuff and I love to get to dive deeper into it. Looking into your local community's leadership programs. So I know like in Missoula, we have Leadership Missoula. Oftentimes different chambers or the university has different kind of sponsored programs. Continue. I love that stuff and I love to get to dive deeper into it. Looking into your local community's leadership programs. So I know like in Missoula, we have Leadership Missoula. Oftentimes different chambers or the university has different kind of sponsored programs where you can continue building relationships with other leaders in your community, but also enhance your skills there and just being open to taking those opportunities.
I don't have much to add other than, just staying curious. In addition to professional development, read books that might not be the ones you want to go to, listen to podcasts. Somebody already mentioned Brene Brown. I mean, there's so much good information out there that we can take in just to make sure we're trying to stay up to speed on all the great stuff coming. But can't agree enough with taking advantage of professional development offered by your organization, and as you're going into a new organization, making sure that there's something there, whether it's paying for programs, offering them in-house, reimbursing you, like some kind of benefit that helps you stay up to date on things.
Ditto to all of that. And I'll just say conferences and such, be brave and ask. I guess that's my that's my theme for a lot of this, but I very rarely have I been told no if I find a conference or something that I'd like to attend that has people to connect with and that I can also learn. Usually there's a way to make that work to attend. But I'll also just say, like, in our busy roles, LinkedIn is a great source of learning. So I will just say I use that quite a bit. I follow everyone I'm interested in. I follow lots of newsletters and sector topics. And, you know, when I need a brain break, I take a scroll through my LinkedIn feed and I learn a lot from just kind of clicking into articles and different things there, instead of going to Instagram or maybe the other things. So just a simple way I try and stay on top of what's happening.
Okay, well, I'm gonna hit us with the final question here. And it is, if you could go back, U of M student self, one piece of advice, what would that be? Anybody?
I'll start this one. So I came to U of M from out of state, from a very rural town of like 300 people. And I remember going through kind of imposter syndrome. And so I would tell myself, you belong, you're meant to be here. And then I think that would help me take advantage of every opportunity and just say yes to things. I think I was afraid, that I wasn't prepared enough or wasn't ready to just dive in and take advantage of all the opportunities U of M offers. So I would give myself that advice.
I'll just
That's
say,
good.
Emily, I have a similar, sorry.
No,
Sorry.
good.
I also came from out of state, from a very small rural community too. So I remember that imposter syndrome. So like, I think back to the Jamie there, and I had a great time in my college experience and learned a lot. And I want to tell her, like, it's all going to be okay. And you're going to have a great career. So again, that stay brave piece. I do think, as I'm giving my daughter advice now, like leaning more into the business skills are necessary. And so I wish I had maybe leaned in a little bit there. But I also don't discredit the work experience. So I know there's a lot of these, internships and research and different things happening. And when I was there as an undergrad, I got jobs. I wanted to make money on the side. And so that a lot of times was when I was starting my career, having had jobs and bosses and different experiences, that stuff was super valuable. So don't feel bad or discredit that. It was really valuable. So yeah, telling her to keep being brave and trying, and it's all going to work out.
And I think on top of that, jobs or extracurriculars in general, like joining clubs and making sure that you're kind of putting yourself out there in situations that are different or uncomfortable or can challenge you, so that, you know, the business side of things, I think we all kind of focused on, like, it's really important to understand the business side, and like communication and soft skills are important. And the more that you engage with things outside of your degree, that can help you really. I think that I would continue to encourage myself to do that, because I think I really benefited from those activities.
Jamie, I liked what you said about being brave, but I think also being balanced. So being brave and balanced, I guess, is my like little tagline I would tell younger Hannah. And then I would also tell myself to take a class on HR, because I think that would have benefited me when I was first starting as an executive director. I had kind of missed that kind of skill set going into the workforce.
All right, so we are coming up here on the hour, so we're going to wrap this up. For any students on the call today, this conversation is part of Career Days. So whether you're looking to build skills, explore industries, or make connections, Career Days has something for everyone. And make sure to mark those calendars, because on March 11th, we'll be right back here for a conversation with professionals in the medical field. And registration for that session is now live on our website, grizalum.org. And I want to give one last huge thank you to Carissa, Emily, Hannah, and Jamie for taking time out of their day today to talk with us. That was a wonderful conversation. And until next time, go Griz.